Welcome to Prison, the Hidden Sentence, raising awareness and providing education and insights for individuals and families with incarcerated loved ones, educating and empowering through personal stories of those affected by and involved with our prison population.
Hi, everyone. This is Julia Lazarick with Prison, the Hidden Sentence. And today I'm here with Carolyn Esparza and Kayla Victor. Carolyn's been advocating for families who have loved ones in the criminal justice system for over 40 years. She saw a need to bring the community together to raise awareness about the effects of incarceration on families. This year is the 14th year of the InterNational Prisoners Family Conference, and that's what we'll be talking about today. There's so much history here and things that will be so interesting for everybody to learn. Now, Kayla Victor is an integral part of the success of the conference, bringing years of event and project management experience. As a result of her involvement with the conference, she's become an advocate for the prison family. So thank you both for being here today. I'm just so excited about speaking with both of you and talking about this conference that I've been a part of for several years myself. So let's start with Carolyn. How did you get involved with the criminal justice system?
Well, the trip to prison actually came from my work in adoption. Worked in adoption for probably about 6 or 7 years, and things happened, and the agency actually closed that I was working for, and I went into private practice. And one of the attorneys that I had met actually from my work in adoption called me one day and asked me to go to the county jail to meet with a young man that he was sure had attempted to murder his mother because he had been adopted. And long story, very, very short. It's a very intricate winding of the roads that got this together. Long story short, I went to the county jail, met with the young man, and left just dismayed that every system that had touched this young man's life had failed him. First was the Child Protective Services that wrenched him out of the hands of his mother, the foster care system that he and his younger brother went through together for many, many years until he was adopted. Then the mental health system that never, he said, never talked to him until I talked to him about his adoption. I said, this kid is going to prison because he was adopted. I mean, he really was going to prison. He also is a very, very severe alcoholic, and that played into all of his problems as well. So I couldn't stand it that our systems are so in such trouble that they're failing our children, they're failing our families, they're failing us as a community. And so I was determined to do something about it. So I started seeking avenues. And actually, Kayla might even be able to shed some light to tell how I actually got involved with prison ministry. The prison ministry work led me to actually work inside juvenile facilities and then later adult facilities that incarcerate people. And then I started thinking, we're doing a lot of work with these kids, especially the juvenile system at the time. There's actually very little mental health that goes on inside of our prisons. But I thought, we're trying to change these people. We're trying to make them come back into our community in better shape than we sent them away in. And we're doing nothing to really help them get there. And I thought that's a lot to do with the outside community. And the community needs to know that these people that we incarcerate have families. Those families are very strongly affected by the person's incarceration. Then we also have these people coming back to our communities in much worse shape than we sent them away. And I thought of ways that we could do something about that. And one day it just came to me as a conference. We would invite the community, we would invite anybody with any kind of interest. We would invite them to come to a conference and start talking to them about prison families, people that are actual human beings and have a need for support and love of the community and are not getting it, and especially people returning from the prisons into the community.
Carolyn, thank you for sharing that. A lot of people see things and they just shake their head and they go, oh, that's horrible. and then they move on. And we see that a lot on the news today, too, with everything that's happening. And not a lot of people step up and do something. So I want to thank you, first of all, for taking that step, for seeing that there's a need for change and taking a step to make that change. And I also want to share with everybody, what was your capacity? What was your job back then when you got involved with this? I think you had some credentials to be working with people.
Right. At that time, as I came out of the field of adoption, I had my master's in social work. And later, when I went to work in the criminal justice system, I also had a license, a professional family counselor license. And so I did have some credentials for doing the work that I was doing. But when you get into the criminal justice system, you don't need credentials because they don't have any mental health or emotional support work going on. And so I couldn't get off for continuing education. I couldn't get off for any time to do more studying. That's why I got the LPC, the licensed professional counselor license, later on.
No, I think that's really helpful. I wanted everybody to know that what you were doing back then, how you got involved. And I just wanted to go over to Kayla to see if she wanted to add anything you had mentioned her earlier to the process before we go into talking about the conference.
Well, I believe that one of the things that she was talking about before was the fact that as a kid, I was walking through the mall and saw a Christmas tree and they had cards with the names on it with kids. And so I told my mom, I was like, isn't that sad that these people aren't going to get any toys? The kids aren't going to get any toys if somebody doesn't get a gift for them. So she got involved with the prison fellowship at the time, and it kind of blossomed from there, is what I'll say.
And I guess what we didn't acknowledge is that Kayla is actually my daughter.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to say that. Yes. We didn't say that in the beginning. So Kayla's been on the journey with you and has just been an integral part of this whole conference. And we're so fortunate to have her. And you.
She really is the one who started it back when she was 14 years old and brought that information back to me about prison fellowship and the angel tree.
So is you, Kayla. Okay. But then Carolyn took the hold of it and moved forward with it. So let's talk about how you even got the conference started. You know, you take an idea and you know there's people out there, but how do you get this started and to have it going for 14 years?
Well, pretty amazing, because at that time, there was very, very little available for prison families for support. Of course, we did have the internet in its rudimentary stages, such as it was. And so I did get on there and look for other organizations that might be working with families of prisoners. And sure enough, there were two that I found back then. There were only two that I could dredge up. One was in New York and one was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I contacted them and asked them how they would feel about putting together a conference. And they were just ecstatic, really, that the idea had come forth. Of course, they weren't willing to do it. They were willing to support me and, to let people know that we're on their mailing list. And so from Albuquerque and New York, Albany, actually the lady at the time was in Albany, New York. Some advertising went out through email and electronically. We put together a very fruitful conference in El Paso, Texas, which is where I was at the time. And people were hungry, so hungry for the support that this could offer them, that they did come from all over the United States at the time.
So at that time, it was the Prisoners Family Conference.
Right.
And now it's the International Prisoners Family Conference. The word got out across the world about this wonderful conference. When did it become international?
Oh, I'm so bad with numbers. I think Francis Saubi from Uganda actually contacted me. I believe it was like the third year of the conference. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm thinking it's when we met in, maybe Kayla, you remember when Francis first came. Anyhow, he has a ministry for children of prisoners in Uganda, and he was looking to grow that ministry over there. And he contacted me and asked if he could come to the conference, of course. And then he contacted me the following year. This was like the third and fourth years of the conference, and asked if we could do a side meeting of people interested especially in children of prisoners. And once he did that, it opened the doors for people to come from all over the world, literally, from South America to the UK to everywhere. And they did come and they had their site meeting. And over the years since then, it has grown into a special side group, essentially, another nonprofit organization specifically addressing the needs of children of prisoners. So we're very proud to have added that component just by electronic connections.
Yeah, isn't that INSEP, the International Association of Children of Incarcerated Parents, that was born from the conference, that your idea brought people together and they could come together to join this other organization that's helping children of incarcerated parents all over the world.
Exactly.
I keep saying wonderful. That's my word today. It's wonderful.
It's awesome. It's just awesome to know the power that this little conference has had.
Let's talk about some of the highlights of the conference. If you look back over the years, you've had so many people come and present at the conference.
Yes.
Is there anything that stands out in your mind of somebody that presented or somebody that you met there? I think we have a mayor that came.
A mayor. We've had so many amazing people. I often say that the best people I've ever met in my life, I've met at the International Prisoners Family Conference. And it's a great question. Highlights that I remember, that everything to me was a highlight, and every conference became the best conference. It never failed that we would leave the conference the next year and the next year and say that was the best conference we ever had. The people were amazing. But what you're talking about is Frank Deese. He's from North Carolina, just an amazing man who went to prison when he was younger. He's a full-grown adult now. He's, I don't know exactly how old, but he's now been mayor of Marshville, North Carolina for, I don't know, some 10 years. And then he left that position thinking he could do more for his community if he actually became the city manager. So now he's been for many years the city manager for Marshville. But he is an amazing human being who wrote a book that said from prison, what was it? From inmate to mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And just an amazing, wonderful, he will have a role in this 14th year conference. So we're excited to be seeing him again. We've stayed in touch with him, mainly just electronically, and he stayed in touch with us and let us know how much he appreciated the conference. And he says it did a lot for him. Well, he's done a lot for us too. So we have a lot of people who have success stories that have come to the conference, shared their stories, and gone on to the super great things. One of the ones that kind of stands out in my mind, though, is from the very, very first conference. I was looking to make a program to pass out to people when they came to our conference, and I wanted a picture for the program. And so I looked up the word prison on the internet, and the first thing that popped into my face was this head of a man, a gray-haired man, looked clean-cut, and I'm going, what in the world would he have to do with prison? So, of course, I was curious, and I opened his website. His name is Chuck Gallagher. He, too, has written a book about 25 steps that he took that totally changed his life as he also walked into prison some years prior. And I was so curious that his face popped up the first thing for prison that I had to contact him. And I did. And he's come back now to 3. This will be his 4th conference with us. One of the things he said when he talked to us the first time is that he knew coming out of prison that he would have to take a job that nobody else would ever want. And so he looked in the newspaper, and he actually found a job in the newspaper selling burial plots door to door. Well, that was a lot of years ago. And today he is actually president of something, I think it's called the National or International Burial Council of the World or something like that. It's a huge position. He's heading up the whole place now from door to door sales of burial plots. And people need to think about that. And the reason I bring that up is because when people come out of prison, they think that they should be doing great things immediately. It doesn't happen. It took Chuck many years to climb that ladder. And I love for him to tell that story so people know the reality they face when they come back into the community.
I just think back the years that I've gone to the conference and all the people that I've met and the stories that you're telling, it brings light to us of what's going on out there. There's things that we wouldn't know, but by coming together and sharing stories, we see that we're not alone, but we also see a light at the end of the tunnel. We see that there's hope when somebody is coming out of prison, when we have a loved one that's incarcerated, that's not the end of the world, that we can work together. And the conference shows us ways that we can do that and how we can learn from others that have been incarcerated. So there's so many good things that do come out of the conference. And Kayla, I want to go to you and see from a different perspective, right? You have a different perspective of the conference. You're making sure that everything is working and that we're all there at the right time, doing the right thing. What are some highlights that you have from the conference that might be different from your mom's?
I'm always excited to see all the different speakers. I was thinking when you guys were talking just a minute ago, just about Fury Young and the amazing work he's doing with the Jim Crow Project. One of the things that I think so amazing about him is you have somebody like Barbara Allen, who's in her 80s. She'll tell people how old she is, so I'm not giving anything away there. And my mom, and they love the music that's being produced by the work that he's doing. Those are people that you wouldn't expect to be together. So seeing things like that is pretty amazing. Seeing family members who feel that they're open to be themselves and take phone calls or whatever they need to do during the conference and not feel judged is probably something that I admire. I've always learned, too, the most important thing to do when we're having the in-person conference is to make sure that there's tissue paper on the tables because some of the stories are very heartfelt. Those are kind of some of the highlights for me.
I agree. And Carolyn, something that stands out for me, and it's somebody that I met, is a young man that you helped when you were working as a social worker in the juvenile system, and he came out when he was in his 40s. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? Because I just find it amazing how you've helped this young man. And by helping, I mean, you stayed in touch with him from when he was young through his whole journey.
Correct. And you're talking about Terrence Sampson, and I can use his name. He went into the system when he was 12 for a very serious crime. And I was counseling at the Texas Youth Commission at the time, and he was assigned to my dorm. And at the age of 12, he had, as we were doing counseling, evidence of great remorse for his crime. But he was 12 years old, and he could only have remorse at the level a 12-year-old is capable of having remorse. Like, I noticed that he sobbed and he sobbed over what he realized he had done. And so I became very, very close with him, I have to say, more so than with many other people. And part of that was because the system had formally decided to treat him differently than they treated all the other kids that were at the juvenile facility. And I thought it was so unfair because he was just a kid. Yes, horrible, horrible crime, terrible, terrible victimization. And I always talked to him about that. I always brought that up, that I could relate to the victims that were left behind. And long story short again, because it was a 35-year journey, I followed him as he was transferred from the juvenile facility to the adult facility. At that time, we could only contact by writing one another. And he liked to write. He liked to read. He got 2 college degrees while he was in prison. And again, long story short, he did come out of prison at 42 years old, in many ways, 12 years old. And that's because people socially die the minute they enter prison, no matter what age they are. If he had been 25 and spent 35 years, he would have been 25 when he came out. So we need to remember that when people come out of prison, they don't grow while they're in prison. There's no opportunity. mentally he grew. He's extremely bright. But when he got out, the very first thing, he contacted me. He was out. And the very first thing I did was invite him to the conference. And he came to the conference. He did act very appropriate at the conference. He did a wonderful presentation at the conference. And he met some very supportive people that he actually has been working with since he attended that conference. He now wants to spread his wings a little bit this year and see if he can make some steps on his own. We hope he'll grow a little bit more. Maybe he's not 12 anymore. Maybe he's 16. So we're glad to help him grow. Actually, Kayla's provided some contacts for him and worked with him. But he's in a very unusual way. He's very much a part of our family. I know that we as counselors aren't supposed to have favorites. And I had many, many other kids that I cared about deeply. And it just happened that Terrence was one that was willing to kind of hang with me just as I hung with him. And it was great to be able to bring him to the conference.
Yeah, and his story was so powerful. You guys worked with him, and he's such a wonderful person. I feel honored that I got to meet him and hear his story. And it was just kind of so hard to believe somebody so young.
That it really happened.
One of the things that I did speak to him, and he talked about restorative justice, and that he got to speak to the victim's family, and it really opened his eyes on how important that restorative justice program is in the prisons that he went through. I didn't know about that, so I just wanted to
Well, he wanted to
mention
do
that.
Yeah, and he wanted to do that for many years, but the victim's mother was not ready for it. And once she became ready, she also acknowledges that it's been very healing for her in the restorative justice programs, and goes around to the prisons and talks to people that are victimized.
And you spoke about reentry and how important that is, especially we talk about how important reentry is starting at day one for the family. And this year's conference is based on, or the theme is reentry. Kayla, do you want to talk a little bit about this year's theme?
This year's theme is successful reentry. And actually, you guys just actually covered a lot of those stories about successful reentry and people that are going to be speaking at the conference. We still have some people that have not been announced yet, and those will be announced in the future. We have some great content. We've got Fritzi Hortzman, the founder of Compassion Prison Project. Her research shows that 98% of the men and women living in prison have at least one adverse childhood experience. And Fritzi will be conducting a session on trauma and what it does for the brain, body, and spirit. We have Professor Nancy Locke from Scotland, who is also an INSEP. She's actually, I believe, the chair for them, and she's with Families Outside. She's going to be speaking with Asha Anderson on the family perspective on death in prison custody. And we're really excited this year. All three of us have had the opportunity to sit down with her and be interviewed by her. But Emma Luga from Prison Pipeline is going to be discussing transformative power of radio to allow adults in custody and have authentic stories. So we're really excited about all of those type of people, and people can stay tuned to you. They can also take a look on our website at prisonersfamilyconference.org and find out more information about as we're listing new speakers.
And we'll have links to the conference in the blog and the transcript from this. So any information that you want to put out there, we'll have those links there. Yeah, we did talk about reentry, and it's just a great topic because people don't realize that it starts at day one. And I want to go back to, you had mentioned Barbara Allen earlier, who says that reentry starts at day one. I think a lot of us say that.
Sure.
I've heard her say it. And Barbara and I met at the conference, and we talk about another synergy. And we came together with our separate groups and joined one group called Prison Families Alliance that provides support to the families. So there's so many people that have met at the conference. I don't think there's been any wedding. I don't know about that.
We talk about the ripple effect of the conference, that very quickly it brought people together, like you just mentioned, you with us, but you with Barbara. And look, I mean, you have a support group essentially for everyone. Everyone can be part of your virtual online support group. But a lot of other community groups have merged and grown and blossomed and popped up from just coming to the conference or just hearing about the conference. People are coming out of prison and talking about the experience instead of hiding in shame. And I think the conference has been largely responsible for that over the past 14 years, because it used to be when we started this conference, people came out of prison and went into hiding. They never talked about it again. They never wanted to talk about it again. Now they not only do talk about it, but they want to talk about it. And it's very, very healing to talk about trauma, to talk about traumatic experiences. And so I think that's another thing, is to remember that not only does the conference affect the people that go there, although that's the best way to be affected by it, but it affects through a ripple effect through people going to it and bringing it back to their communities.
Yeah, definitely. There was a time when the pandemic hit and it was like, what happens with the conference? And Kayla, do you want to talk a little bit about how the committee decided to move forward with the conference during the pandemic and how it thrived?
Yeah, it was actually kind of interesting because nobody heard of Zoom at the time. And we actually had to do a lot of research just to figure out how we were going to put the conference on. But one of the things is we wanted to make sure that we still persisted and made sure that we still moved forward and still were able to bring people together from around the world. So we moved the conference online and virtually. And so obviously for 2 years during the pandemic, and then this year with the air flights being so expensive for people to come, the board made a decision to make sure that we still have the conference and still move forward. And so that's why we're going to still continue to stay virtual. Maybe one day we'll be able to get back in person, which would be great, and maybe have a small component that's virtual. That's what I hope, because I think that one thing that people say about the conference, and we've tried to do that even virtually, is that everybody's a family member. And so it's kind of like a family reunion, and it's great to hug people and see people. And obviously everybody follows each other after they've met on Facebook and that type of stuff. And some people that have met virtually, that still continues on, but obviously it's always much better to be in person and just be able to communicate however we can. So.
And people can still meet virtually. I've made a lot of connections through the conference virtually. Some of the facilitators for Prison Families Alliance are from people that Barbara and I have met at the conference. Mm-hmm. So even though we're not together in person, there's still have that part of it where you have empathy, where you have compassion, where you feel close, you're not being judged, you feel safe in that environment, that you can talk to people and can meet people, and especially learning about all of the stuff that's out there. I mean, I think one of the biggest things for families is that they find out that they're not alone, that there's other people that are experiencing the same things. Mm-hmm. And I just think the conference just provides so much value to anybody that has somebody that's incarcerated or somebody that's even involved in the prison system. Like you said, like social workers, law enforcement, attorneys, anybody that's out there to open their eyes, to lift the curtain to really what's going on with the families. And Carolyn, you've done that. You've done such a great job of raising awareness and bringing people together.
Well, the idea was, of course, to humanize the prison family. And I think in so many ways it's done that. But there is something to be said for being able to hug one another, for a social worker or a law enforcement person to be able to come into the same room and embrace a person who's been affected by the criminal justice system. I mean, all the things you just said are just so important. We can hardly express it all in an hour or just any kind of brief presentation like this. And that's why we really encourage people to be there, that you can't really know the effect of something like a conference that will embrace you. No matter what your role is in criminal justice, it will embrace you because we want it to be better for everybody who's affected by it, whether you work in it or whether you live in it. It's important to humanize it for everybody.
And Carolyn, there's one thing that I hear you say a lot, and that's about the victims, that we have respect. You could probably say it a lot better than I can, but we're humanizing people but we're recognizing that there are still victims out there.
And it's so important that you brought that up because we talk a lot about the people who've done the crime, and I've heard it on the news, is that nobody cares about the victim. They only care about being soft pedaling and being coddling prisoner and their family. Well, that's not true. However, it's kind of like we just talked about Terrence. We talked about the victim and the victim's family every time we met while he was in the juvenile facility, because this is about victimizing. It's about creating fewer victims. If we have people who are healthy, emotionally as well as physically, of course, and what we're talking about is making people who go to prison healthy. So when they come back to our communities, they're not making more victims. They're not victimizing more people. We do care about victims. Some of us have been victims ourselves. And we don't want other people to feel the terror, the horror, the sadness, the grief, or whatever it was that victimized us. We don't want other people to feel that way. Yes, we're talking about prisoners, but we're talking about it because everybody's ignored them so long that we created a monster of a system. Excuse me for being so bold and honest about it, but that's a fact. Our criminal justice system does nothing for anybody, and it won't until it takes into account that the people that it's incarcerating are human beings. And certainly their families out here in the community are. So that's one of the things we want to emphasize. But you're right. We also must respect the victims because they're the ones that are hurting out here. And we want them to know that we care about them very, very much.
Thank you for adding that. I know that you always say that's important, so I thought it was important to bring it in here. Yes. And one of the things that we haven't said, and I think Kayla can provide that information, is when is the conference this year?
So the conference is October 19th, 20th, and 21st, and it will be virtual.
And where can they sign up for the conference?
At prisonersfamilyconference.org. And go to the registration page and sign on up.
And is there an email if somebody has questions?
Yeah, and that's info@prisonersfamilyconference.org as well.
That's prisoner family, singular, conference.
Prisoners is plural. Family is singular.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Prisoners Family Conference. So you can just Google it. You can go to the website, prisonersfamilyconference.org. All right. We got it. This has just been so insightful. I'm so excited about the conference this year. And I'm so glad that you guys could take the time to speak with me today. I know you have a lot going on. The conference is just weeks away. And there's so many good speakers that are going to be on. I just can't wait. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Julia, and we're offering workshops like Reentry for families on the outside to prepare them for when their incarcerated loved one is released. You can sponsor someone to attend one of the Prison the Hidden Sentence workshops